Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the WD Travel Channel. I am your host, Chris Baker, and I hope everybody is having a wonderful Friday. And so I just want to touch base with you and see what the new topic is today, which is reopenings around the world of any countries for travel. And that means from March to June, July, August, September, October, November, whatever you want this year. But usually late this year would be ideal for travel for some countries. But I think ideally for the rest of the world, it'd probably be sometime in 2022 if you're interested in going abroad then. So, anyway, I've prepared a list of countries that could be visited now or sometime in the near future with restrictions. So here it goes. In Europe, because if you already know, Europe has mandated COVID procedures since last year, I believe, and they require necessary COVID-19 vaccine passports to all EU residents by summer 2021. Now, it is important, no matter where you travel, to get vaccinated. And I say this as an experienced travel agent, and that people should get vaccinated before they travel to any country, anywhere abroad. If you're not going to do that, you're going to put yourself at risk. So I would suggest you get the full 2 doses. Usually it's two for U.S. and Western people. But anyway, usually it's a card like this, and it has up to 2 doses, and it has the information. And usually, after each dose, it's usually a 3 week waiting period. So after you take the first dose, it's like 3 weeks, and then you do the second dose. But I would highly do that, as well as getting your passport updated, if it need be. If the expiration date was within 4 weeks of traveling, I would expect you to do that, as long as that the vaccination card, and you would be good to go usually. So in Europe, Estonia has reopened its borders as of February the 2nd, 2021. Those who are vaccinated are permitted to enter. Those who are not vaccinated also must submit to a 10-day quarantine period. So I would suggest, usually there are going to be in situations where you might have to be in a quarantine. So my suggestion to you is, if any situation gets to that, if you want to travel early or want to wait until quarantine is over, that's fine. But I would also suggest buying traveler's insurance just in case anything happens, because that basically covers you against natural disasters, quarantines. They'll probably pay for your 10-day quarantine. Depends on who you book with, but usually sometimes they provide coverage for that as well. Georgia has opened its borders on February the 1st, 2021. As of that time, all travelers must have valid pass documents proving they have vaccinated. So, again, one of these with a passport. And those arriving from the following countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Belarus, the EU, Israel, Kazakhstan, Norway, Northern Ireland, Qatar, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Turkey, Ukraine, United Arab Emirates, the UK, or the US must adhere to a PCR COVID test 72 hours prior to entering the country. So if you booked a ticket 3 days before, you got to have testing. You got to have evidence that you've been, tested negative. So anyone also entering the country must also submit to a second COVID test after the third day of staying in the country. So if you ever want to go to Georgia, I don't know if you want to go to Georgia to visit Russia or, just want to visit one of those countries, you got to be aware of that, okay? Slovenia. Slovenia is issuing a mandatory quarantine for 10 days unless travelers show signs of a negative COVID test within 48 hours departure or a negative COVID rapid antigen test taking 24 hours before departure. And also, there can be a quarantine up to 21 days for those who are vaccinated. So, as of now, I wouldn't, suggest going to Slovenia, but if those who, really want to go there, that's what you should adhere to. Greece has opened its borders to vaccinated travelers as of March the 9th, 2021. And I also must note that the summer season has begun, or will begin, on May the 14th. So, the only travelers admitted to Greece at this time are from the EU, Switzerland, Norway, Liechtenstein, Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, Rwanda, South Korea, Thailand, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, and the UK. Other countries can only be permitted for essential travel purposes. Passengers entering the country must also fill out an online passenger locator form, including their address, a quick response code, which will be submitted to them the day of their arrival. So you have to fill that out on their website, which I can look up for you if anyone requested of me. Message me after this if you want one. And yeah, it's usually a phone deal there. France is currently accepting travelers from within Europe, so most of Europe is like from within, so outside is not really a possibility now. I wait till let's say August or October to October would probably be a better time, and they'll probably have reopened worldwide by then, but we'll see. The only travelers permitted to France at this time is Andorra, the Holy See, which is the Vatican, of course, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Norway, San Marino, and Switzerland. Those who are permitted must also provide evidence of a negative COVID test, which is standard. For Italy, it recently opened its borders to EU residents on June the 3rd, 2020, so earlier than usual, spending, if you take into account that usually in 2020 most of the country's been shut down. Only a few had opened like that. Then permitted EU countries, at that time in 2020 was the Schengen zone, the UK, Northern Ireland, microstates and principalities of Andorra, Monaco, San Marino, and the Vatican. But as of January the 14th of this year, all EU residents can enter the country after proof of a negative COVID test taken 48 hours prior to arrival. Austrian residents must also quarantine for 14 days upon submission of a second negative COVID test result. So 2 tests and mostly 48 hours prior to arriving. And for Austrian residents, they have to quarantine for 14 days additional. Don't know why, just for Austrians, but who knows. Residents arriving from Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Singapore, South Korea, Rwanda, and Thailand must also quarantine for 14 days. Any other residents from around the globe can only be allowed entry if they are traveling for work, health reasons, and those studying for absolute urgency. They must also submit to a 14-day quarantine as well. So, usually for Italy, it's pretty restricted right now, guys. I would still wait. For Europe in general, I would still wait till, July, August, September, October. Those are the months I think that it will be opening up to everyone. The UK. Now, in the UK, anyone arriving in the country must quarantine for 10 days. That's standard procedure. They must also show a negative COVID test within 3 days of departure. So you have to get tested within 3 days of traveling and show a negative test of that. As of January the 18th, 2021, the UK canceled its travel corridor program, which allowed travelers from certain countries to bypass the mandatory 10-day quarantine, meaning they don't have to quarantine at all. This rule now applies to all British citizens returning home as well. So, turns out that they just, started a quarantine mandate for that after that law was bypassed. Also, a fine of £1,000, which is equivalent to $1,270, will be implemented to anyone who fails to self-isolate or quarantine themselves. So just a heads up, guys, if you're going to the UK, there's something you should abide by. And also a £3,200 fee, which is equivalent to $4,070, will be issued to anyone who does not provide accurate contact information. So, if you just misspell it, you probably get fined $4,000. Leaving a quarantine location is only permitted to those with urgent medical needs, obtaining basic necessities such as food and medication, to attend a funeral of a close relative, or in case of an emergency. Those are only 3 reasons, guys, that you can be permitted to leave the quarantine. On January the 14th, 2021, the UK banned all travelers from South America and Portugal, so those countries are not allowed, or that continent and that country is not allowed, I should say. For Croatia, Eastern Europe again, as of July the 10th, 2020, the country opened its borders to all non-EU residents, including those from the United States, who entered the country as tourists, business travelers, or students, will still be allowed to do so if they provide evidence of a negative COVID test. Again, I would still not go to Europe until later this year, let's say. We could wait till then, but, it still would be a hassle just to get to Europe, trying to get to an Eastern Europe country, they allow people trying to get, through Germany or France just to get to Croatia. Just seems like a hassle at this point. And effective January the 13th, 2021, only residents from the EU can enter, so it's still contained within residents of the EU. So I still wouldn't recommend doing it. As of Germany is concerned, travelers who enter the country upon providing evidence of a negative COVID test within 48 hours of departure must also submit to a 5-day quarantine. So the quarantine mandate is pretty much, Germany, France, Italy, those kind of main EU countries. The quarantine may be ended early if the traveler adheres to a second COVID test and is negative, or quarantines for 10 days instead without a second test. So either take the first test, or, show evidence of taking the first test within 48 hours of arriving in there and take a 5-day quarantine, or you could take a second test, and if it's negative, or you can quarantine for 10 days without taking the second test. It's up to you if you really consider wanting to go to Germany early. The U.S. is considered one of Germany's international risk areas, meaning it's one of the countries where travel will be almost prohibited at this point, but we'll see if that opens up in the later date. Each individual state or Länder, which is it's called in Germany, have their own standards of quarantine procedure. So this whole quarantine procedure only adheres to Germany as a whole. So if you're going to like places like Bavaria, down there could have this different COVID procedure than something up north or something in the east or west Germany. So it's something to watch out for, and I can give anyone any information if they ask for it. Austria has reopened its borders on June the 16th, 2020, but it's facing new restrictions and closures as of now. It currently went into lockdown from November the 3rd to December the 6th of last year. Partial lockdowns are have been enforced since December the 6th. So, yeah, tourism not encouraged as of right now. So, if you really, really want the urge to go to Austria, and Germany, I would suggest doing it later in the year if you want to do it this year, or wait till next year because next year is the optimum period for European travel. Guys, trust me. And you could also contact me if you want to book something, for later this year or next year and see what they have. It's your choice. Um, Spain. Spain is only permitting EU residents and those from approved countries to enter with evidence of a negative COVID test 72 hours after departure. So, so basically, Spain is a little bit more open in terms of other EU countries, but still, to get into Europe right now, it's still going to be a hassle. But I'd still wait till later. Um, Portugal, only EU residents and approved countries may enter with a negative COVID test. The approved countries that are allowed to enter as of now are Australia, China, South Korea, New Zealand, Rwanda, Singapore, Thailand, Hong Kong, Macau. I know, got to say, guys, I think China and Hong Kong, I don't think those places would be allowed to enter Europe, considering, but yeah, it's kind of weird. All passengers 2 years of age or older must adhere to a COVID test and provide proof of a negative test within 72 hours of departure. So, if you're willing to go to Portugal right now, you gotta take another test there and provide negative, or do it 3 days before you enter the country and provide a negative test result. So, like, get a slip of paper or something. Travelers from the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Estonia, and Latvia must quarantine for 14 days. So yeah, it's also a 14-day, most likely a 14-day quarantine is mandated. Sweden, non-essential travel ban issued until March the 31st, 2021. So anything that is not for, specific reasons, if it's just for luxury, I wouldn't recommend going there right now. All inbound travelers must show evidence of a negative COVID test within 48 hours of arrival. Again, it's, get tested, show it's negative, get a piece of paper, and 2 days before arriving, and when you get there, just show it to them. That'll be it. A temporary ban has been placed on the UK, Norway, and Denmark. So those 3 countries cannot enter Sweden this time. Only Danish citizens in Denmark and those who travel for work, family, or legal matters may be allowed into the country. So, if you're doing it for work, you can be allowed. All those arriving must provide proof of a negative COVID test within 24 hours of arrival and quarantine for 10 days. So another, negative COVID test before arriving and quarantine for a certain amount of days type of deal. Usually for most European countries, that's the case. Ireland, as of February the 4th of this year, all travelers must provide a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to departure and quarantine for 14 days. So, yeah, it's another one of those standard procedures for Europe. Malta. No, Malta is a different case. Out of all the European countries, travelers must provide a negative COVID test within 72 hours of departure, another 3 days. However, random swab tests will be required at the airport. So once you get in the airport, they'll start testing you. Be aware of that. U.S. travelers must spend 14 days in quarantine in one of the approved countries mandated by Malta and provide proof of a negative COVID test as well. So you can't actually enter the country until 14 days later. So they'll probably send you to like one of the approved countries nearby, and you'll be spending 14 days in a hotel or something there. So I would, if you plan on going to Malta, I would plan on doing travel insurance if you want to do it early, or just wait and the mandate will probably be lifted by at a later date. Iceland. One thing about Iceland, guys, is that it is now open to travel for all UK and US citizens. So it's one of the one countries in the world that we can enter right now. So, and the requirements is you have to be vaccinated, must have a valid passport, like I said before, and usually 4 weeks before the departure date. So if you have one that expires 4 weeks before the departure date, I would suggest getting it updated. Always bring in evidence that you have been vaccinated. So hold on, bring these with you with your passport, always, just in case. Citizens of Iceland and EU residents are the only other authorized travelers among those in the US and UK. So I would take note of that, guys. Iceland is the premier destination for travel right now. Very limited travel restrictions. Albania. Albania has reopened its borders as of July the 1st, 2020. So pretty early. All travelers welcome with temperature checks, no quarantine required. So Albania is also one of those countries, but still, like I said before, if you're going to Eastern Europe, you're still going to be quarantined and everything when you get through countries to Europe. So I would suggest going at a later date. Andorra. Andorra has reopened its borders as of July the 29th, 2020. Faces restrictions and is closing its borders now. So I wouldn't suggest going there. Anguilla reopened its borders on August the 21st, 2020, and it requires travelers to apply for a PCR test or a COVID test online before entering. So it's one of those deals where you go to a certain website and you would fill out the form, everything, and then provide it on your with the app or something on your phone when you're arriving. The only drawback is that there is a $500 visiting fee for staying 1 week. So I think it's one of the only countries that actually fine you for staying for a limited time there. Antigua and Barbuda have reopened its borders on June the 4th, 2020. Travelers must bring evidence of a negative COVID test with them, which means, get the slip of a negative COVID test and bring it with you. That's also important as the vaccination card. Remember that. Aruba. Aruba has reopened its borders in June of 2020. All travelers must provide proof of a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to departure. Mandatory insurance policy is needed, so you have to pay $30 for a mandatory insurance policy in Aruba if you visit. And lastly, the Bahamas. Bahamas has reopened its borders in July of 2020, but reclosed and reopened in October 2020. All travelers are welcome with proof of a negative COVID test 5 days before arrival. More inland COVID tests are required for any stay longer than 5 days. So if you want to go to the Bahamas, which would probably be a better destination than Europe right now, at least. But I think Iceland is the best choice as of yet right now because it has less restrictions. But if you have to do that, if you want to do that as a choice, I would suggest that you adhere to that and try to schedule it so that you have to stay 5 days or less. If you don't want to take any more tests. And that is the current update I can get for openings as of yet. But if you guys need any more information, just send me messages on my Facebook, or if you have my email, just email me. But if not, I can give you that information. So I also want to know that any of you Archer members watching my channel, that I will be going to the Las Vegas Family Convention in July. So if you're there, I look forward to seeing you, meeting you in person. And yeah, so you can message me or whatever if you want to talk about, getting together or anything there. So yeah. Um, Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Like this video as well if you enjoy watching this program. And also watch a travel hour I made last week about visiting Houston, because we know trying to get trying to get COVID tests, especially in places like Houston, is still a mess right now. So yeah, until next Friday, tune the WD Travel Channel. I don't know why I'm always saying like that. Anyway, the WG Travel Channel. And I'm Chris Baker, so until next Friday, I'll see you then. Bye.